Welcome back to Two Pretty Good Bad Men, an Alias Smith & Jones podcast. I'm your host Tabitha, and we can all rejoice that we are done with the separation episodes. Today we'll be covering episode 11, The Root of It All. This episode was shot in early March 1971, and it aired March 25th, 1971. The story and teleplay are both by Howard Brown, and we've talked about him before. He's a returning writer, having already penned The Girl in Boxcar No. 3. This will be his last ASJ episode. It was directed by Barry Shear, and he is a newcomer to our show, and he will go on to direct 4 more episodes in Season 2. Shear was a director since the 1950s. He directed about half of The Eddie Fisher Show, 25 episodes of a weird quiz show called Take a Look, 21 episodes of The Donna Reed Show. His later shows included The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Name of the Game, Ironside, The Streets of San Francisco, and Policewoman. He also directed the pilot for Starsky and Hutch. That is very important to me. He directed some movies and TV movies. He did one called Across 110th Street, which I don't know, but I do know the song. Our guest stars this week, we have Judy Carne as Leslie O'Hara. Judy Carne was Pete Duel's co-star in the short-lived sitcom Love on a Rooftop. I've only been able to find low-quality copies of some of the episodes, and it does have some funny and clever moments. I would like to see the whole thing if it ever surfaces, and I would like to see it in better quality. It's about an architect and an art student who fall in love and get married after 2 weeks or something like that, and move into a rooftop apartment that has no windows. Hijinks ensue. I found some quotes about Pete from Judy. Quote, "He's instinctively a giver. He looks into your eyes, and a lot of actors don't. He acts with you and for you, not for himself. That's a very enviable thing." End quote. Quote, "Hollywood lost a brilliant actor, and I lost a loyal friend. I shall never forget him." End quote. Quote, "I adore Peter, but damn it, he can be so thoughtless at times. I'd like to shake him until his teeth rattle. He doesn't always use sound judgment, and when he forgets to look at his wristwatch, it's usually when he's due on set. Some of his cracks are unnecessary, I might add, especially when they serve to aggravate a situation. But, as I said before, Peter is a darling, and we do get along when we're not rubbing each other the wrong way." End quote. And Pete had this to say about Judy. Quote, "I dig Judy all the way, and I felt warm and close to her right from the start. But that doesn't mean I don't feel like belting her when she throws her weight around. You know she only weighs 108 pounds soaking wet, but don't let those fragile looks deceive you. Judy's loaded with temperament, and I have to cut her down to size now and then. Otherwise we wouldn't have our wonderful, wild relationship. Because we always know where we stand, there's no further antagonism between us. Until the next round." End quote. Basically, everything I've read about their relationship is that it was super love-hate. They could be tearing into each other one minute and hugging and laughing the next. Pete would show up late to set, and this would understandably make Judy angry. This is an issue that will come up on ASJ too, but I'll get to that when we get to it. In her autobiography, Laughing on the Outside, Crying on the Inside, Judy recounts a story where someone called her a slur due to a relationship she was in with a woman, and Pete started beating the guy up and had to be restrained by the crew. Aside from Love on a Rooftop, Judy Carne is most famous for the sketch comedy show Laugh-In. That show also starred people like Lily Tomlin, Goldie Hawn, Richard Dawson, and Henry Gibson. Carne also did episodes of Love American Style, I Dream of Jeannie, and The Big Valley. She even guest starred on Gidget once, and this was before Love on a Rooftop. So she's actually in all 3 of Pete's shows. That's pretty cool. Carne also did another short-lived series called Fair Exchange in 1962. It's about 2 World War II buddies, one from the States and one from the UK, who decide to swap teenage daughters for a year. Well, I don't have time to unpack that, so let's just move on. I also found it notable that after Pete's passing, she, Roger Davis, and Pete's brother Jeffrey Duel all guest starred in the same episode of Ironside. Sadly, Judy Carne had a rough go of it after her work on Laugh-In. Despite her best efforts, her career kind of spiraled and she suffered from substance addiction, and she passed away in 2015 of pneumonia. Next, we have Victoria Thompson as Margaret Chapman. She has a small filmography on IMDb. Her first credit is in Funny Girl in 1968, and her last credit is an episode of Barnaby Jones in 1977. In between, she guest starred on Bonanza, Bewitched, Cannon, and The Odd Couple. Then we have Meg Wiley as Prudence Palmer. She has a fascinating Star Trek story. She played the very first villain on Star Trek, like the pre-Shatner Star Trek. She was the villain in The Cage, the original pilot with Captain Pike and Number 1 instead of Captain Kirk, but Spock was still there. That's what really matters. She played the character, but she was dubbed over by Vic Perrin and then later again by Malachi Throne. She was also in films like Dragnet, The Last Starfighter, Lipstick, and Marnie. And she was in an episode of It Takes a Thief, because the universe would collapse if we went an episode without bringing up that show. She worked on a couple of soaps like Days of Our Lives and General Hospital, and finally, I have to bring up the TV movie she did called Moving On, starring David Soul, Kate Jackson, and, once again, Jeffrey Duel, Pete's younger brother. Next is Logan Ramsey as Oscar Rosewood. He was in movies like Bustin', Walkin' Tall, and Head. You know, the Monkees movie. He was the cop in the bathroom. The whole segment dedicated to him called The Cop's Dream. I really, really love that movie. He was in Star Trek II, Bread and Circuses, which was the Gladiator episode. He guest starred on Here Come the Brides, Mission Impossible, Kung Fu, MASH, Maude, Mary Hartman, Mork and Mindy, Alf, and Night Court, among others. What a career. He will also be in another ASJ episode in Season 2. Then we have Tom Ewell as Deputy Ira Treadwell from movies like The Girl Can't Help It, The 7-Year Itch, and Adam's Rib. He also did 44 episodes of Beretta. And finally, we have Mills Watson as Squint Simpson, and we've already talked about him. He was in the McCready Bust. Now, on to the episode. No sneak peek this week, praise Jesus. Look, the thing is, I don't like the sneak peeks, but if you're going to do them, then do them. Be consistent. I don't like that it's sometimes there and sometimes not, and then sometimes they do that weird thing where they play clips over the guest star credits with music. Just pick a thing and stick to it. Although in doing my Maverick research for this show, I've noticed that it happens there too. Once again, our boys are riding the stage. The boys, along with an older man, are on one side, 2 young women and an older woman sit opposite. Kid is grinning like a loon at one of the young women, who shyly smiles back. The other young woman, Leslie, asks the older man, Oscar Rosewood, if he is in fact wearing a real tooth on his waist. He sure is! It's his late wife's. He wrenched it out of her mouth himself when she died. Okay. The older woman, Prudence, says that is disgusting, and she's not wrong, but I don't know, maybe he and his wife mutually decided on this as a memento before she died. Maybe. It's possible. Rosewood's certainly not ashamed to talk about it. The group introduced themselves. Kid brings up the fact that they were held up on a stage a few weeks ago, another point for continuity, and Hayes said that just couldn't happen to them twice in 3 weeks. Just as we hear gunfire outside. Hayes, you done jinxed everyone. After the credits, they do in fact get held up. Hayes and Kid play it as cool as they can. Hayes does try to hide the few dollars he has, but the thieves search him too well and take it off him. They take off without any violence. Leslie wants the guys to go after them right this instant. She's very desperate. She's even questioning their manhood. But they don't care. They're not going to risk themselves for a few dollars. How very maverick of them. Leslie wants them to go after everything because they stole the mailbag and she had a letter in there addressed to herself. They still aren't interested until she offers them $500. Hayes and the Kid catch up with the thieves and immediately get the drop on them. They find the letter and make the bandits put all the money back in the mailbag. Then they want their own personal money back. The Kid lost $10 and Hayes lost $4. I love that. Also, I couldn't tell at first if this scene is supposed to be day for night, because I can see the bright blue sky in the background. There's no mistaking it. But there's also a fire going and the sound of crickets chirping, and it's shot very, very darkly. And then Hayes said goodnight. So, come on, show. Do better. I can see the sky. This is terrible work. One of the thieves, Squint, recognizes the Kid. When Hayes brings this up, Kid says no, that couldn't possibly happen twice in 3 weeks. I love how meta this episode is, referring back to Stagecoach 7. The boys return the $20,000 to the bank, and for their troubles, they get absolutely no reward. The bank says it's up to the mail service to reward them. Poor boys. In the women's hotel room, Margaret and Prudence try to talk Leslie into just going home, but she refuses. The boys show up with her letter, and she says she can't pay them right away, so Hayes pockets it and won't give it up until they're paid. She says the letter describes where a military man buried $100K during the war. Hayes and the kid instantly lose interest. They are sure it's a scam. They've heard the story plenty of times before, and if the money really is there, it's probably Confederate money and therefore worthless. She offers them $50 and 10% as a bonus once they find the money. Then she offers for them to hang on to her ring as collateral. They agree, but they want $500 apiece, not the 10%. I'm sorry, when I said 50, I meant 500. Leslie is kind of a match for Hayes. She's not as clever and silver-tongued as him, but boy is she just as ambitious and stubborn when she's zeroed in on a payday. Deputy Ira Treadwell knocks on the door, and Prudence seems very smitten with him. She tells the guys that he saved her life earlier that afternoon. He asks her to supper, and out they go. Aw, that's cute. The boys take Leslie and Margaret to dinner. While everyone's out on their dates, Rosewood breaks into the girls' room. He goes through it, presumably looking for the letter, but we don't know yet. The next day, the four prepare to depart. Squint shows up in town wanting to talk to the sheriff. Once he does, the sheriff comes rushing out to round up a posse, and they ride off after Hayes, Kid, and company. Sort of. They're going in the opposite direction, but it's the thought that counts, right? Kid does his usual flirting with Margaret, who is just his type, quiet and slightly helpless. Hayes and Leslie, on the other hand, are getting to know each other, really. She said her father taught her to ride and shoot and that she loved him very much. Before they can talk much more, the posse somehow found them and rides up to arrest Hayes and the kid. Seriously, how did they catch up with them? In the jail, the kid naps and Hayes paces. They're being guarded by the deputy when Leslie comes in to speak with them. They still won't admit to her who they are. I love that. No matter how caught they are, they never admit to being Hayes and Curry, because they always have a hope that they'll find a way out of it. Leslie wants her letter back, but they're not that stupid. They say she has to bust them out if she wants it back. She says she has no idea how to do that, and Hayes says if there's a profit involved, he has no doubt she can work it out. Squint knocks on the girl's door. He offers to help them find whatever it is they're looking for. Leslie is hesitant and tells him to just come back tomorrow. She'll have an answer for him then. Leslie manages to track down a gun from somewhere and holds up Treadwell. He says he doesn't have a key to the cell, that the sheriff takes it with him whenever he leaves. She goes to shoot the door open, and I swear the kid jumps in front of Hayes. It's very sweet. They tell her that it's way too dangerous to do that, the bullet's gonna ricochet and hit somebody, and they'll just have to pick the lock with the deputy's penknife. Once they're free, they all head back out into the wilderness. And now we're definitely getting some crappy day for night, but at least they're not showing the sky so blatantly. Kid and Margaret are asleep, and Hayes and Leslie are having a quiet conversation. Leslie says Hayes practically knows all about her now, and she wants to know more about him. She knows he must really be Hannibal Hayes, but he keeps on denying it. Hayes kisses her twice, and we pan away. Oh yeah, they made sweet, sweet love. I do see the chemistry between Pete and Judy that made Love on a Rooftop fun to watch. The next day, they find the spot where the money should be buried. Unfortunately, it's in a stream. Hayes and the kid flip to see who goes in, and of course, Kid loses. He wades into the water and starts digging. Squint and some not Squint guys are watching from afar. The kid hits something, and Hayes rushes into the water to help. They pull out a huge chest, and when they bust it open, it is U.S. currency. The boys are disappointed, and Leslie is not about to change the deal. She gives them exactly what she promised and pulls the rest out in a sack, just as Squint comes to relieve them of it. However, Leslie manages to get away and ditch everyone else. Wow. She just left her friend there. Okay, I take it back. Hayes wouldn't do that. Well, maybe he would, but not without the kid. Hayes, Kid, Margaret, and Prudence start walking. What else can they do? And now the sheriff's posse is in the mix. They start following Squint. Treadwell breaks off from the sheriff's posse because he said his horse has gone lame. Rude. Maybe you're lame, Treadwell. Different kind of lame. Anyway, he says he'll catch up. When Squint and his gang get a free moment, they stash the money to come back for later. Leslie, however, ended up following them and retrieves the money. She holds it in her arms and swings it around like she's just found her missing child. It's funny. Our 4 walkers cool their feet in some water, and Leslie gets thrown and left by her horse, so she has to walk too. Hayes and Kid's group come across a railroad track, but they said it's a spur line and isn't used very often. Luckily, there's one of those push cart thingies that they can use. The women rest and the boys work the lever. Leslie spies a water tower and stashes the money there. Then she flags the boys down on the track, and they're kind enough to let her on. They make it back to town and prepare to go their separate ways. Prudence is staying to be with the deputy, and Leslie and Margaret are going back to Philadelphia. Kid and Margaret kiss, and she asks if he's ever been there. He says he has once. She wants him to come back there with her, but he obviously can't do that. Boy, if I had a nickel for every time a woman asked one of the boys to run off with him, I'd have 3 or 4 nickels. As the train pulls away, Hayes thinks it's strange that Leslie would leave without the money. On the train, Leslie totally ditches poor Margaret. She claims that she actually just loves being out west and feels free and blah blah blah. I guess Margaret doesn't deserve any of the money, even though she knew it was a thing. Now Leslie's not going to share it. You're a terrible friend. But Margaret says it's fine and lets her go, so she does. She rides back to the water tower to get the money, but the boys are waiting for her. She says that they were both already paid in full, and I guess they were. I mean, I thought maybe Squint took their money too, but I guess not. Anyway, that's when Rosewood shows up. I bet you all forgot about him, didn't you? Because I certainly did. He claims he's a treasury agent and he's been tracking this money. Of course, he doesn't have any proof on him that he is who he says he is. Hayes says that they didn't steal it, they found it, so they deserve a reward for that. He keeps trying to negotiate, but it doesn't matter because when Rosewood dumps the bag, there's nothing but plants and a note inside. The note is from Prudence. She and Deputy Treadwell stole the money and took off together to live the good life. Treadwell had ended up following Leslie after he left the posse. I thought your horse was lame, Deputy. Rosewood decides he's gonna keep tracking the money, but the guys just give up. In fact, they're kind of amused by it. I mean, they got their money, so why wouldn't they be? Leslie still wants to find it and wants them to help her. And yeah, no, they're over the whole thing. The boys want to head to Denver for a while, and they do still have the money from Leslie. $1,500 in all. Good for them. She blackmails them into letting her go to Denver with them. But I guess that doesn't last long because we'll never see her again. Then they flip a coin, presumably for Leslie? First of all, gross. Second of all, she's already having a thing with Hayes. Sorry, kid, I don't think she's into you. The end. This is a fun episode. I do like the dynamic between Hayes and Leslie. They can really match each other in many ways that's fun to watch, and I really do wish there were a decent copy of Love on a Rooftop out there. There's not really anything to Margaret and the kid. It's there just to be there, I guess. And Squint just vanishes from the episode. I can assume he came back off screen and discovered the money was gone, and that was that, but it just kind of felt like it was left dangling. The line of the episode goes to both Hayes and the kid when they're talking to Leslie about the possible money. Hayes says, that money's not yours. It belongs to the United States government. And Kid follows up with, unless it's Confederate money, then it belongs to you. And the episode itself goes to Hayes. I really love the energy he and Leslie have together. The makers of Love on a Rooftop were right in pairing them up. Next time on Alias Smith & Jones, someone is picking off members of a poker game. Could Hayes be the next victim? Research for this podcast comes from the wonderful book Alias Smith & Jones, The Story of Two Pretty Good Bad Men by Sandra K. Segala and Joanne M. Bagwell. Quotes from Judy Carne come from her autobiography, Laughing on the Outside, Crying on the Inside, Rona Barrett's Hollywood 1972, and Judy Carne and Peter Duel, Kiss or Kill, by Jerry Asher in Screen Stories, May 1967. Thanks for listening.